Welcome back to the Turn Row podcast with your host, Kyle Brumley. This week on the podcast, the guys are joined by a very special guest, Doug Goodman. Doug brings more than 4 decades of leadership and expertise in the seed industry, following an early career as a high school algebra teacher and multi-sport coach. Since entering the agricultural sector in 1979, Doug has held key sales and management roles within Crow's Hybrid Corn Company, Callahan Enterprises, and Peterson Genetics, helping navigate major industry advancements, including the introduction of Roundup Ready Soybeans. Today, Doug is newly retired, but he continues to serve as a valued member of the community, providing technical support, marketing leadership, and industry insights backed by a lifetime of experience to his close friends.
Welcome back to the Turn Row podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Brumley. As always, my partner in crime, we got Brad Downing. Brad, today is a special day.
Yeah.
We've got a special guest, Doug Goodman, with us today. So,
also known as Goody.
That's true.
the soybean savant. There's a good one for you.
Oh, that's a good one. We're going to get you a new nameplate on the front of your vehicle.
Well, it's nice to have corn as a rotational crop.
So I feel pretty honored to have you here today, Doug. Less than 24 hours ago, you were on Lake Cumberland skiing and you decided to come home and sit down with us. So I don't know what that says about you, but it says something. So I really appreciate it.
Well, it tells you that my purpose in life is water skiing these days and that soybeans was kind of my career. And it's been a very good one, 42 years basically in the soybean industry. So it was a pretty good start to my life anyway.
I think the tail end is better. I'd much rather trade you places.
There you go.
You just want to ski all day, don't you?
I do.
Yeah, I don't mind being on the water. I'm not gonna lie. Going out tonight on the lake would not be a bad day.
So 42 years in the ag industry, Doug.
Well, actually longer than that. I was with Crow's Hybrid Corn Company for 5 years prior to that. And honestly, probably would still be an advanced algebra teacher had it not been for the late 70s and early 80s, which in some regards, unfortunately, makes me think of where we're at today in 2026. I think there's a lot of parallels between agriculture in the 80s and what we're starting to see here in the mid 2020s.
Advanced algebra.
I mean, don't ask me to do math. I'm a biologist and chemist by trade. I'm not a math teacher, but
yeah. So I've known you for a couple of years now. I know Brad's known you for a few years longer than that. There's a new tidbit already in the first 2 minutes of the podcast. So why don't you just give us your background, your early ages, kind of what molded you into your love, your passion for agriculture. Like we were talking about off camera beforehand, we all can point to that one Genesis story that we've got and what set us down this path. So start wherever you want and we'll end up to where we are today.
Well, probably it goes back to Girard, Illinois in 1962. And my dad, it was May. Of course, back then everything was moldboard plowed every spring. Dad had 20 acres of corn to get in, and the forecast was for rain. And he put me on a 70 John Deere with a 16-foot wheel disc, and I worked the ground ahead of him. I had a John Deere A and a 494 planter, 40-inch rows back then.
you have to get the horse down, right?
Yeah. I remember finishing that field up with the disc, parking it in the barn lot, and coming back, riding the fender while Dad planted the last head rows, or the end rows, whatever you want to call them, headlands. And we're making the last pass across the field, and it starts raining. So we got the last 20 acres of corn in around May 20th, I think it was. rode up to the barn lot, parked the tractor, and I got the biggest hug I ever remember. And from that moment on, the thing I loved to do most was be in the field working with my dad. And honestly, he'd stop every once in a while for whatever reason, maybe to light a cigarette. If I could outlap him a couple of times a day, that just made my day. So that's how I got started.
You know, what's really cool is I heard you say kind of ride back on the fender well. A fender well is honestly a lot of what started my passion for ag as well. So my influence, my role model is my grandpa. I spent as much, if not more time with him when I was young. And the fondest memory I've got to this day is he fed hogs in the 90s, kind of when I was young and growing up. And he had an 806 diesel that was hooked up to his feed grinder. And my spot was right there on the fender well, right beside him. So that's kind of cool.
Still got the dent marks in it, right?
That's right.
Well, actually, now you talk about dent marks. We had two 4010 diesels at one point in time, and I honestly believe there's probably one out there somewhere that's got a perfectly indented seat to fit my bottom.
Your one bottom plow?
Yeah, because I put about 6,000 hours on that girl.
Yeah, we've all had that joy in our lives. Mine was always just kicking my boot on the tire just to see how many times I could hit the lug to see if it would kick my boot off or not.
Right.
That's why I was disruptive.
That's okay. That's okay. So there's your childhood. So I'm curious where the algebra comes in.
Well, actually, I originated at Greenfield, Illinois, and the Greenfield Tigers. I don't know. At one point in time, I think they've been to the state playoffs 25 out of 32 years, kind of a football tradition. I got out of high school, Vietnam era. It was an advantage to go to college back then and get your 2S deferment. I drew a high enough lottery number. I didn't get drafted. And so I actually, I farmed 2 years with my dad. And let's put it this way. You ever hear two bulls in a China shop or whatever?
Yeah.
We found out quick that our personalities didn't match. And I decided to go back and finish my education up. So I decided I wanted to be a football coach. I ended up being a baseball coach as well. And I taught advanced algebra at Lincoln Community High School for 3 years and algebra at 2 years prior to that at Carlisle High School. And the only unfortunate thing was I think the last year I taught was 79. We talk about inflation now. It was 20.3% that year. And my house loan was 16 3/8%. And I got a 3.2% raise. And being a math teacher at the time, it was pretty easy to see there was a big void between what I was earning and the amount that I could budget in a year.
Mm-hmm.
And teaching didn't fit the bill. So I went into seed corn sales, spent 10 months in southern Illinois as a district manager, got promoted over Indiana and Michigan as a regional manager back there for Crows and did that for a few years. And honestly, probably the feather in my hat, if you will, was the pick year, which corn acres were cut in half. And I had a 7,000 unit increase in the pick year.
Don had to write you a big check that year.
Don didn't own the company at that time. That was still the Crow family that owned it back then.
All right.
And so I did pretty well, but having an increase in the pick year was pretty much unheard of. And so that gave me an opportunity to go to work for a company called Callahan at the time. And that's how I got into the seed business, or not the soybean business, in 1984, and pretty much specialized in soybeans from that time forward.
So that's when you moved to Noblesville or Cicero
Cicero.
for working for Noel?
Well, Noblesville initially, but Noel Callahan and
Yep.
Callahan Seeds for, I was retail on their soybean division. Actually helped introduce corn to that program, and then spent 5 years in their seed trade division, providing soybean genetics to seed companies.
Yeah. And Callahan was out of Westfield, wasn't it?
Yes, out of Westfield.
Where the AgReliant office, I don't know if it's still there or not.
Well, it's no, I don't believe it's AgReliant anymore. I think that's GDM.
Oh yeah, that's right. John, or yeah. What's the name I'm looking for?
Another acquisition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don Mario. There we go.
Don
There we
Mario.
go. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Gerardo Don Mario.
There you go. Brazilian company buying an American company.
Argentinian, I believe. And actually, I met Gerardo in, I believe, 1986. He was doing contract production for Callahan and Stein, and I gave him tours of research locations in, I believe, Indiana, Illinois, and a couple of Iowa locations.
That's going back, and look where they're at today. Crazy how these companies have just grown and changed over the course of 30 years.
Well, typically I always think the largest soybean companies in this country are Asgrow and Pioneer, but Don Mario, when you look at the South American influence, they were selling, 48 million units of seed. They're by far the largest international retail brand, in my opinion.
All right, so we've got Crows, we've got Callahan, and we didn't mention at the beginning, but you are, roughly 2 weeks retired?
Roughly 2 weeks, formally retired, yes.
And
Can't be retired for skiing every day, Kyle.
that's the only way to retire. So after Callahan, correct me if I'm wrong, but you spent the majority of your career with Peterson Genetics, correct?
Correct. I started with Mike in 93, 25 years full-time. And then I had an opportunity. Well, I guess it was my first retirement in 2018. After just a few months, my wife, Leslie, came home one day and said, apparently you don't like fishing and golfing as much as you thought. What are you going to do? And so I had an opportunity to go to work for Don Funk and his organization for about 6 years. And upon retirement then, the last couple of years, I've been back assisting the Callahan Group with fall note-taking in soybean plots and packaging seed corn for
Callahan or Peterson's?
Peterson's, excuse me. I've been back with the Peterson Group, taking notes in the fall on primarily enlist soybeans. That's going to change dramatically this year because you've got the introduction of new traits that'll be hitting the market probably in 2028.
Yep. Things are going to change when Viconic hits.
Well, not only Viconic, but I believe Enlist plus LGT27, I think that is going to be named Response with a C instead of an S.
All right.
Response. And then you're also going to have the new cyst resistance trait added to Enlist. I think that's called Nemosphere. So you'll have viconic response and enlist plus nemosphere, which is pretty much total resistance to cyst nematode, which is pretty important in some areas of the Corn Belt.
I think probably a lot more areas than a lot of people realize. Even as we sit here, we kind of don't think we're in a high pressure area, but I think there's more out there than what people really want to think there is.
Well, historically, you've seen it before. I mean, areas we have SDS, everybody thinks sudden death is the real issue. Really, it's probably mostly a nematode issue and an early infection that's caused SDS.
And it can be, yeah. And, it's interesting because you get into different geographies like northern Iowa and into the Dakotas. You have such dramatic impact with iron chlorosis, and there are very few varieties that handle that well. And so you'll get a situation where people use the same variety repeatedly to handle the iron chlorosis or the high pH soils. Unfortunately, cyst nematode, if you don't rotate the varieties or the sources, you'll build cyst populations quickly. Fortunately here, we're not bound to one particular trait so much or one disease or nutrient deficiency where our varieties are limited. We've got more chances to use different maturities and varieties and avoid that constant exposure to cyst.
Sure.
So that's kind of what's going on today. I want to definitely hit on kind of the new age of where we're at today a lot, but I think something pretty unique, pretty interesting happened kind of midway through your career, about 96 or so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess I'm just curious as a Roundup baby. I mean, that's what I am.
Yeah, I forget you're younger. You drank the Kool-Aid really early in life.
That's right.
We just started dosing it, and that's why all this gray's coming in. You haven't got it yet.
Not yet. So, but let's just talk not so much the actual traits themselves, what they've kind of done to the scope of agriculture, but maybe more just pre and post kind of that event happening on a kind of where you come from, the world of germplasm, of sourcing, of what companies are looking for. So was it a drastic change or kind of just what happened?
It was probably similar to the earthquake in Venezuela this year. I mean, prior to 96, I was already at the point in my career where I was supplying soybean genetics to seed companies. And it was interesting because I could go into Pioneer, for instance, and show them our portfolio of varieties. Of course, they had a huge breeding program themselves, but no breeding program is ever excellent from group 0 to group 6. There's always a hole somewhere. And so I would be talking to their soybean product manager or typically it was a PhD level soybean breeder. And he'd say, yeah, we need a 2-3 with these traits. And I, as well as other companies, would present what we had available. And fairly often they would purchase varieties from us. At the same time, we'd get done and he'd say, by the way, we happen to have a 3.6 variety that's doing really well in the market. We've got a brown potted version that we're not doing anything else. Would you consider licensing that or sub-licensing that for us? And so back in the day, whether it was Northrop King or Jake's, the name we haven't heard in a while, Dr. Dennis Byron was a phenomenal breeder for them. It was a very give and take kind of situation. And then 96, we saw the traits start to be introduced. Soybeans, we had Roundup Ready Soybeans. We had the BT trait pop up on corn. And soon thereafter, we saw the chemical companies come in and purchase some of the major seed companies. I'm going to go further, the major breeding organizations. And from that point forward, things changed dramatically. We would see the rewards programs and, the typical chemical marketing philosophy versus the old time seed companies where, hey, we'll help you and you help us. And it was a very give and take situation. It has evolved or devolved dramatically since that
Depends on
period
what
of
side of the
time.
fence you're on, right?
Correct. But it was a lot more fun prior to 96 when everybody was kind of working together. Also, it was great to see. I mean, initially when Roundup was introduced, Roundup soybeans didn't yield as well. And just be honest, the first few generations weren't as good, except when you eliminate weeds, all of a sudden they did yield better because you didn't have the competition in the field stealing the nutrients away from soybeans.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it was amazing. I can honestly say I thought when Roundup came out, it might capture 60% of the marketplace. Within 4 years, it was well over 90%. And we've seen things change since then because not only Roundup, but we've incorporated Liberty and dicamba and several other traits. And we're getting ready to see more new ones
What's
on the
amazing.
horizon.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about that, and we talk about being Roundup babies, right? I mean, that's on a podcast that people are going to listen to, like, oh my gosh, you guys use Roundup and glyphosate. I mean, there's the stigma that's going on. It is a great chemistry. I mean, in my opinion, for everything that happens in the soil and everything else, no, it's not. I mean, there's a lot of chemistries we use that are not, but did it do the effectiveness of what was needed at the time for weed kill? Yeah, I mean, 100% weed kill through the 90s and early 2000s. Then resistance built up over time, which I'm not going to go down that rabbit trail of why I think it did or why it didn't. But the fact of the matter is, you look at the amount during the 90s, late 90s, and the 2000s, the amount of glyphosate was being used across all of America and row crops that were resistant. It was an astronomical amount. Today, I don't know, I don't have the figures in front of me, but it's got to be well less than half the amount because I look at our own farm. I mean, other than using it for burn down, that's about the only time we use it anymore.
Right.
And that's just burned down in front of our soybean acres. It gets, I guess it does get used post on corn one time on some of our premixes, but we don't have to use it if we don't want to. But you look at today's marketplace and the average farm, we're using way less glyphosate than we've ever used in the last 30 years. So that's a good step in the right direction, but we've quit using a lot of it because of the ineffectiveness of it. And like I said, I won't step on that giant bomb or landmine right now of why I think it's being ineffective. But from our perspective on the bionutrient side, I mean, Kyle, we found out ways to make it more effective back like it was back in the early 2000s by doing things differently from a biological process. But it's interesting because you go back to that time frame and it switched everybody's whole entire chemistry programs. I mean,
It was the chemistry program.
yeah,
You went from, I mean, there were really I guess there was premixes, but you went from a lot of those historical chemistries coming from honestly post-war and wartime up until the first truly kind of brand new thing that just replaced all of it. So
yeah. What amazes me, I don't know what the figure is today, but I believe it was about 2018 I was looking at. Uh, since 1998, there hasn't been a new chemistry really developed on the market. There's different premixes and there are different modes, but there was never a new mode since 1998 made because didn't have to. Everybody used Roundup.
Yeah, that's true. And, the expense of developing something now and the regulatory loop or hoops you have to jump through to get it approved, it's pretty tough road.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, tons of money. Kind of like a new John Deere 9RX 830.
I could have built 2 of my houses today for what one of those cost.
There you go. There you go.
So you hit on something a second ago that we used to talk a lot about early in my career. I don't think it comes up as much anymore, Brad, but it's the yield drag. When the trait integration first happened, there was some yield drag with that first generation. I remember early in my career when basically Roundup 2 or Roundup Ready 2 yield came out, it was touted as no yield drag. I believe the exact thing was 7 to 11% better.
Yep.
But we did see some yield drag there. So then again, going back on your years of being in that world, what do you think's the main driver kind of in that yield drag? And, it always gets better. And, we are on the verge of basically the soybean space completely flipped on its head once again here in the coming years, like you said, with the Biconic and other stuff. So what do you see as far as kind of year 1, year 2 out of those platforms?
Anytime a new trait is released, I'm skeptical that you're going to automatically see yield levels that you're used to. I'm going to say probably the first year Viconic or Response or the new Enlist Nemosphere come out, let's say 10 varieties are released. I would be surprised if there's one of them that's still on the market in 4 to 5 years. And it's just that when you look at a research program, that first R1 cross, you might say, you're looking at millions of varieties that are tested yearly.
Mm-hmm.
One out of about 20,000 makes it to the marketplace. And today, when you look at varieties, there are very few varieties today that last 7 years.
Oh, yeah, no.
Whereas if you go back historically, like to, I think Beck's 367, that was in the marketplace for, I believe, 12 years.
Yeah, I sold it from inception to the day she died.
Yeah, and then I think there was a 302 that actually was a line that they had exclusively out of the Asgrow breeding program.
You're talking about the original Roundup, the 301s?
Yeah, the 301s.
Yeah, that bean lasted a long time because that bean was the number one selling bean in the state of Indiana for a long time.
For a long time. But you don't see that now because what we're seeing is the size of these research programs. I believe the MS Tech program is testing about 2 million lines a year. I'm not exactly certain where the Bayer program is or Pioneer, but I've got to believe they're approaching that number of varieties tested per year.
I believe the last figure I heard, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe on beans it was averaging like a variety would average 2.3 years in the marketplace before it moved on to the next, and then corn was 1.8.
Mm-hmm.
So as farms we work with, right, you get used to something, you're like, hey, this really works for me, I really like it.
Mm-hmm.
Your chances of it being there in 2 years are slim to none.
Right. But, these research programs, they may currently have a focus on Enlist. Well, they don't just automatically hit a switch and discard all of the old Enlist material and replace it with Enlist plus LLGT27 or Enlist plus Nemosphere. It takes time. And so it takes time to build those populations up and find out which parent lines are going to contribute the yield and disease resistance you need. Usually, once a trait is introduced, it's probably 2 to 4 years it'll hit stride, and you'll see the yield gain. But initially, what you're looking at is, okay, in the nematode area, the new Enlist plus Nemosphere may automatically have an advantage in northern Iowa or the southern part of North Dakota, where cyst is the biggest problem, whereas it may not have the same impact in an area that hasn't had a dramatic infestation of cyst nematode.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll just see how it boils down. And, the part of it is these programs, some of these breeding companies are running multiple breeding programs at the same time. As a trait gains acceptance, then they'll put more and more resources and more elite testing out there. And the germplasm pool will improve dramatically in a short period of time. I'm going to say 3 to 4 years, they'll be at a level of yield comparable to or superior to the current trait that we're working with.
Well, you get down to, you look at most, I'll just take the Enlist side of things. I mean, the first generation, second generation, you had to really cherry pick some varieties out there that were good. Most of them were just average at best. You use the third and fourth generation, we saw some major advancements. Now we're on the sixth and the seventh generation.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're way advanced compared to the first and second generation. And that's been, 6 to 7 years now we're sitting in that lineup. So, I mean,
looks like we're starting over again.
And and that seems like it happens, right? I mean, about every 6 to 7 years, new technology rolls in and then we start all over again.
Yeah.
So hopefully we get that gap narrowed down to where we don't see the downshift for, the first couple of years. It'd be nice by generation 2 or 3, we're upshifting again.
Yeah. Well, and, I go back historically. I remember when my father actually was interested in Macoupin County, 1965. He was the first farmer in the county to certify all of his corn acres at 150 bushel or more. In 1965, we were farming 240 acres in 65. We were farming 2,000 in 70. So he was a pretty good farmer. But, what's interesting is that same period of time, we never ever had a 50 bushel soybean yield. But all of our beans went in after corn.
Mm-hmm.
They were all, for the most part, bin run. So bin run soybeans, basically we'd have a portable conditioner come in, clean them. But if there was any seed-borne diseases like pod and stem blight or anything, they were still there. We didn't have any advanced fungicides or insecticides. We did use an inoculant.
Mm-hmm.
You really couldn't plant beans early back in the old days because they didn't have the Phytophthora tolerance or cyst nematode resistance, the things that we've grown to appreciate now. We didn't want. I think we wanted better yields. We just didn't have the opportunity planting late May and June,
Right,
to manifest 70 and 80 bushel yields.
Yeah.
And one of the 150 bushel yield projects a couple of years ago in Illinois, we had 106 bushel fields. And that feels pretty good compared to wishing for 40 or 50.
Yeah.
So
We're hoping to get that 120 this year, 120 to 150 on a few. We'll find out.
I mean, that's a great transition point for us, because that's really what I want to talk about today. I mean, I'm over talking chemistry. I'm over talking traits. I mean,
that's good to me.
what we do is, obviously push the envelope. We're disruptive. We like to do things differently. I think that's kind of why you came in a couple years ago, and honestly, you don't work for us. You don't work with us, so to say, but you've been more of a sounding board, especially in the high yield category. I know that you looked at some of our fields, compare and contrast notes, kind of coordinate us with some other people to the west. So let's just talk high yielding beans. It's hard to get there. Obviously, Mother Nature still trumps all. But I think that what you do a great job is kind of hitting home on those foundational pieces. Don't overthink it. So where do you start on the journey to 150 bushel beans?
Well, it's interesting. I just mentioned Dad never grew 50 bushel beans. One of my buddies is on our home farm, and actually moved into the home my dad built. And one of those pieces of land that never ever hit 50, he's got an 83 bushel yield on for 5 years. Now that's actually 10 because it's corn soybean rotation. So it's really interesting. I think anybody that doesn't irrigate is at God's will or blessing for rainfall.
Right. You're at a disadvantage from day one because you can't control water.
But right now we're right in the middle of pod formation and grain fill. This is the important time in a soybean plant. Earlier varieties, maybe the last part of July into August, full season varieties, August into the first week of September. But this R3 to R6 period of time is critical. And 1 to 2 inches of rain every week to 10 days is a blessing for soybeans.
Sure.
No rain or floods are bad too, but it's critical that soybeans get the rainfall they need during pod formation and grain fill to hit those 80 and 100 bushel yields.
Well, the other thing, we talked about irrigation a second ago. One of the biggest things that I've been studying here is the pH and electric conductivity between rainwater and actual well water that you're irrigating. Obviously, the rainwater is much better balanced pH and electric conductivity, not just for the plant, but microbes in general that are actually moving nutrients in the plant. That rain, yes, irrigation's always going to beat us, no matter dry land all the time. But if you have that rain coming down, we have a much better chance.
Well, and I believe also doesn't natural rainfall typically bring a little nitrogen along with it? Yeah, like
and
1 inch.
Yep.
1 inch of rain, about 10 pounds of nitrogen. And, most people don't think about this, but soybeans really have a higher demand for nitrogen than any other nutrient.
Correct. Even more than corn.
Yeah. Yeah. And, University of Nebraska used to have a phenomenal irrigation website, but I work with people out there. If they got an inch or two of rain, they were delighted. If they didn't get rain next week, they'd put on an inch or two with their irrigation system and add 10 pounds of nitrogen as they did.
Just trying to mimic the rain.
But the thing is, the plant couldn't really digest through the leaf system or the foliar application more than 10 to 15 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody put on 30 pounds, are wasting time and money. Or if you got a natural inch of rain, you're wasting time and money. So nitrogen addition was kind of iffy, but it depended on whether or not you got rainfall. And so nothing beats Mother Nature's irrigation system.
God had her figured out from day one. We just keep trying to mimic it.
Right. And overall, I think, one of the things that I've learned about you guys are better on what I call soil science or nutrition than I am. But the interesting thing about it is, I think as we move forward, having excellent soil fertility, balanced soil fertility is going to be a key factor in maintaining any level of profitability moving forward.
Mm-hmm. So what are some other key factors? We talked about, what's the roadmap to get to 150 bushel? We have been on that journey for the last 4 years. We've had some 3 to 4 acre spots and fields where we've had some 120 to 124 bushel spots that weren't just blips on the radar. I mean, they were actual areas we had treated, but we haven't hit 150. So how do we get to 150?
That's a really good question. And, to me, it all starts with emergence. And it really starts out with uniform emergence. And not only that, the higher the fertility level is on the farm, actually the lower the population demand. Let's say I had a high fertility field and I could guarantee every seed came up quickly and on the same day. I'd probably want 85,000 final population. Now, I can't guarantee they're all going to come up, so I'm not suggesting we'd plant 85,000. But when we have uniform emergence, we've got uniform root competition for soil nutrients and moisture. And when we overpopulate, then you have plants struggling to get the nutrients and moisture they need. They tend to grow tall and thin and fall over. And that's why I like to see on high fertility soil, lower populations, let those roots branch out and grab as many nutrients as they want. But also that's going to promote cytokinin. And you're going to have more branches loaded with pods. It's amazing when you see Randy Dowdy and some of these guys that have had the world record yields, if you will. When you see a plant with 11 branches that look fuzzy with pods, it's pretty amazing. You don't do that with 210 plants per acre, 210,000 plants per acre.
How low did we start?
A little bit higher this year than in years past, but I started at 110 this year. Keep in mind, we're 20-inch rows. Everything is treated with in-furrow treatment, not an NPK blend, but focused mainly on exactly what you just said. Kind of our mix is geared towards basically helping even emergence and kind of just that early season vigor. Last year, we got started extremely early. I bumped her down to 90 a couple times. I didn't tell anyone about it, but typically kind of that if we get started where we typically start, conditions do look good. We're on a warming trend instead of a cooling trend. I'll start about 100 or so. And at times, if the stars align, if we have a really good growing conditions like we've got this year, I will concede to what you just said. I think 100 is probably too many, but we've got tighter clay soils. We tend to fall in an area that doesn't get 1-inch rains. We get no rain or we get 6-inch rains. So we're kind of just playing the odds there.
Well, in those odds, you're probably planting what, 2.25 inches deep, making sure you've got plenty of moisture and that your ground temperature is uniform.
Yeah, how deep were we this year? Well, I found out.
So 2.25 is
On soybeans, we're talking here, right?
Yeah, 2.25 is what I'll call default or standard. We socked some in just to see at 3 inches. There's a couple passes out there that are even deeper than 3 inches. I'll be the first person to say that I was optimistic going into it. I thought it was an epic failure about a month later. You've probably seen some of our videos out there. You've walked that field, actually, I think. It was pretty ugly for a while. And then magically it weathered the storm. And if it's not our top producing field this year, it's got to be in the top 2 or 3.
You never know today.
No.
Well, it's interesting because I've seen, planter mistakes at 3 inches. It took longer to come up, but I've seen more uniform emergence than I see at thumbnail depth, which was my dad's preferred depth.
Just a little dust on top.
Oh, yeah, a little dust on because you didn't want them to seal in.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is you'd have some beans that had enough moisture, they'd pop right out of the ground. And then you had things laying there in dry dirt.
And then a month later,
and they'll come up. But the problem is the root zone beneath those late emergers is already monopolized, and you end up with a 12 to 16, 18-inch plant, probably with no pods on it. And that's why I want that uniform emergence with every bean pulling to the finish line, not variable emergence.
I like you preach. Uniform depth, uniform temperature, uniform moisture.
Yeah,
those 3 things right there are the biggest key factors at planting time.
Absolutely.
So we gotta wrap this up soon, but I kind of wanna dive into one other thing that we do. I know that we do it, and it segues back into some comments that you just said a second ago. Is we are in basically the critical period. 99% of farms out there are done with their beans. They've got their R3 pass on. We've got
It's lake time.
Yeah, it's lake time.
That's right.
We've got 60 days in some areas, 45 to 50 days in some other areas. What's your thought on this kind of crazy idea that we've got on we're going out there at late R4, R5, maybe even into R6? Are we wasting our money, or is there kind of still ground to make up?
Well, it's interesting because in working with people that are shooting for those huge yields, most of them are tissue sampling.
Yep.
Every other week here.
Yeah, I've been in Iowa and the Dakotas and Minnesota and seen iron deficiency chlorosis when those leaves are yellowing. Here in Indiana, I've seen the same kind of symptoms. Manganese deficiency. A little manganese chelate resolves that pretty quick. So what I've noticed is people that are shooting for the high yields today are tissue sampling. And even though it's looking historically on what happened to that point in time, I kind of liken it to building a brick house. And if you're going to build a protein molecule, you need, let's say, to reach out and grab magnesium. But if you reach out and there's no magnesium, you can't build that molecule. And so what I like about tissue sampling and foliar feeding is making certain that the nutrients are there that can be ingested by that plant to achieve the higher yields. In a corn soybean rotation, we talked about this prior to sitting down. I think about 110 pounds of potassium are tied up for every 100 bushel corn
Residue.
you harvest. If you harvest 100 bushel corn, the new ties up about 110 pounds of potassium. 300 bushel corn ties up about 330 pounds of potassium. So sometimes you look at your soil tests and then say high or very high in potassium. But how much of that is locked up in corn stalk residue, and you have a situation where you got a potassium deficiency showing up in tissue samples.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, it gives you a roadmap of something you can do during that R3, 4, 5 stage to spoon feed that plant to make sure that each building block, if you will, is there so you can put together that wall and continue to manufacture more yield.
Well, you just brought it up right there. We're not going to dive on landmine, but many people that listen to Turn Row are going to hear me speak for the next couple of years. I mean, we talked about, you just said manufacture. We talk a lot of things in much farms. Everybody talks about farms. You've got to be better business. Got to be better businesses. They got to transition from farms to being a highly managed business. Well, from the day you're a farm, you're a business. I don't care what you do. You're doing everything. There's business things happening. Well, we as an industry have to change. We have to change into a manufacturing company. We manufacture corn and soybeans, wheat, cotton, rice, whatever maybe you're growing, tomatoes. You're a manufacturing company. And right now, the line's not shut off. The line's just getting ready to ramp up even harder for producing whatever widget or any that we're producing. And everyone shuts off at R3. It says, hey, we're done. Put the sprayer up, wash it, clean it. Let's get ready for harvest. When to your point is, the back half of that bean's life, or the back third of that life, is where the money's made. There's two things happening. I know it for a fact, and we've talked about this. We're trying to limit the stress level in the plant and not have the plant shut pause to capture what it's building for full pod potential. And then the biggest thing, seed weight. So you can have all the pods like last year. We had 2 bean pods last year on a lot of plants that we were just like, these things are loaded, but they're 2 bean pods. There's just a lot of 3, there's a lot of 2s. And we're like, what happened? Well, it's whatever Mother Nature gives. We had more pods, more races. But the problem was the seed size was so large going into R4. And then what happened? We didn't rain for 70 days straight. So our seed weights just tanked because there was no rain, no matter what we did foliar to help with. Where you take years like this, now we have ample moisture, we're getting rain, our temperatures are right. My opinion is, I'm going to dump not gas, I want to dump napalm on top of this fire. I want this thing to just blow up, because we'd have potential, I think, in some areas for 150 bushel type beans if we play our cards right and the rain continues for the next 30 days.
Well, I agree. I want to feed it, but I also want to do it prescription wise.
Sure.
It's interesting. The guys that are shooting for the huge 600 bushel corn yields, 300 bushel bean yields, what they're feeding it may not be financially rewarding.
Correct.
But I think what we can do is I actually call it prescription, by actually getting that fertility set up and taken care of on the front side, and then adding the nutrients needed as they're needed, we're going to build or manufacture yield. I don't want to put out, well, just like I said on nitrogen, there's no need to put 60 pounds of nitrogen on a soybean. It cannot ingest it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's learning what is available in the soil, what's needed, and timely applying that to increase the yield, manufacture the yield, whatever you want to call it, and do so at an optimum level where you're creating profitability. Because is going to be increasingly difficult with diesel prices, fertilizer prices. It's going to be difficult to do these things without having profitability in mind.
Yeah. Well, and Tyler, case in point, we've seen our tissue samples for the last couple of weeks, and as we near the end of the season, next 30 to 45 days, the 4 things that we know we have to focus on. One is keeping energy levels up, get bricks levels through sugar. So whether it's bricks builder, our product, or exceed nanomain sugar, we look at things that are needed through fuel or draft. But then the big focus is going to be, we know we're not short, but our tissue samples don't show us an adequate amount or high amounts of K, boron, and zinc. And boron, zinc, and K are very, very important for seed quality and weight late in the season. And if we're seeing them just kind of sit at the edge of being troublesome to tanking off, I mean, our prescription plan over the next 30 days is those 3 elements.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, our tissue samples, we know what they're saying. I think this R4 pass in some of these fields where we know we've got high potential, we're going to address, keeping some of the boron up, keeping some of the zinc up, like Brad said. But I think just I won't say a blanket application, but kind of we'll say that default application late season is, we're not going to build that factory anymore. We're protecting that factory. But really kind of what we're aiming to do is no longer feed, but signal hormonally for that plant to start reallocating. I mean, we've spent all the money up front. We did everything right up to this point. So beans, and again, a little bit different than corn, standability is not as much of an issue. Typically, we're going to harvest them when the weather conditions are better. So let's tell that plant to, if it has to, rob everything that we've done and shuffle it into those pods, into those seeds. So that's a lot of the thinking of where I'm going to go in some of our dirt this year with that, R5, maybe R6 pass in some areas, is saying, okay, let's start pushing everything in here, kind of that sink to source relationship. Can we exaggerate that even more than it naturally does on its own?
You mean I'm putting a tinfoil hat on there for a minute and saying that reproduction hormones are different than vegetative hormones?
100%.
Don't say. That's crazy.
Yeah. All right. So with that, Doug, I appreciate your wisdom, your insight. We got to know you a little bit better. We got a history lesson, and we brought it home with yielding beans.
Math lessons, what we got.
I think we got history.
Yeah, more history. Well, hey, to end this though, seriously, when are you guys going to come and ski with me somewhere?
Well, there's the skier.
Let's eat lunch here in about 10 minutes, and then let's go.
The boat's in the shop. We can go wakeboard. How's that sound? There you go.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of the Turn Row Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Cross Creek Ag Solutions. From precision ag technology to smarter, data-driven decisions, Cross Creek helps farmers maximize every acre. Ready to grow more with less guesswork? Visit crosscreekag.com and see what your operation's missing. Cross Creek Ag Solutions. Farming smarter starts here.